what news do we have this month? Well, in Australia, all we're talking about is Google and the government, because the wisdom of our government is to tell Google what the rules are going to be to have Google running here. And of course, as ordinary little people, we've been very frightened that we are going to have no Google. And I go to China a lot, or I did before coronavirus, and I have to live without Google for a month a year in China, and that is not awesome. I get by on Bing, but you do go to the VPN a bit every now and then when you get stuck. So living in Australia without Google does not sound awesome to me. And then today, Google has signed a deal with Channel 9, and that's one of our big news companies. So essentially, they're getting $30 million a year from Google, better than nothing. News Corp, Rupert has not signed. He holds out, and he seems to want some international deal, but they want to pay them lots of money. I actually thought Google would go tell them to get stuffed, and we're not going to give you anything. And then the poor old Australian government would have to make a decision what to do. But anyway, that's the news. And of course, I know if you're not an Aussie, you might not care about this, but whatever Google ends up doing here is going to set a precedent. So whatever's happening here is happening likely in other countries around the world, because we have such an enjoyable time taking on these guys first. Oh my goodness. So what other news? Let's go to coding. And there was this supply chain attack. Now, when we write applications, we like to use libraries. And if we're using libraries, we're using other people's code, and it's much better than writing all your own code. Now, last week, a researcher, check this out, he demonstrated that he could execute fake code, and he had other companies such as Apple, Microsoft, Telstra, etc., pulling down these fake copycat packages. And essentially, if you are using, say, Angular or React and using NPM or your Python, and that's PYPL, otherwise pronounced PyPL, or Ruby Gems, all these package libraries, what he did was kind of clever. He went and found, if you're taking a library internally, like, sometimes often we're using public libraries, but you can have an internal server of packages. And essentially what he did is he made the same names publicly with a higher version number, and then people were accidentally grabbing those. So he said the success rate was simply astonishing, from one-off mistakes made by developers on their own machines to misconfigured internal or cloud-based build servers to systematically vulnerable development pipeline. One thing was clear: squatting valid internal package names was nearly a surefire method to get into the networks of some of the biggest tech companies out there. So this was a horrible backdoor, and he said after he published his results, there was 150 copycat packages doing the same type of thing on NPM. So what is this going to do? Well, he just, there's Sonatype explaining how to do it, but basically you just make the same version of the component with a higher number, and it takes it. Now, if you're using public packages, nothing to be worried about. But if you have internal servers of code, there is, what will happen? People will be scared now. People will have some extra checking that they're going to do. I guess the immediate result will be people will not want to take updates frequently. That's not going to be cool, but I think they'll put extra checks on where they're coming from, and they'll make sure they're configuring it correctly. So all very good, I guess. But anyway, that's what that story is about. It is fascinating. So what's the next story? The next story I might mention to you, Facebook and Apple. So Apple are about to start advertising heavily that they are the privacy company. You know, you're going to see the Apple logo with keys all over it. And this is essentially going to be the situation where you go to Facebook or any type of site like that, and it's going to say, hey, Facebook want all this data. Do you want to give it to them? And if you say, no, I don't want them to track me, Apple will actually block it for you. So that is the story there. Who's going to be collateral damage for this? Probably Google. And this details all that. But where does Google stand on this? Google has been much less aggressive about the changes, with the company's most recent blog post stating that it's working to comply with the changes for the apps, and it's advising customers they're going to see a significant impact to their Google ad revenue on iOS after the change. So they also, you're going to see the search bar in iOS 14 being replaced. Now, obviously, Apple probably won't do it as quickly as before because of the whole Apple Maps, Google Maps debacle. But one thing, Apple is persistent, so they're going to make that happen eventually. Let's move on to some other news. Let's go into DevOps world. So the DevOps world, we have ARM templates. ARM templates are so we don't keep making changes to our Azure resources manually. So all of us care about good DevOps, and ARM templates are the way to go. Now there's a great little video out here called Project Bicep. Now at SSW, we have used this, but we also use Farmer. We have a video out there. In fact, I put the video. You'll see I've made a comment on this particular rule as well. On this particular blog post. And Matt Wicks gave a great rundown of all the different tools. And Bicep is one of those. But what you don't want to be doing is manually working with ARM templates. And this is the option C Bicep. And the one that we like is Farmer mentioned here, but they're both pretty awesome. So check that out. Now, another piece of DevOps news is delivery plans. Now, we have lots. When you're working in a Scrum team, you have a bunch of PBIs and bugs. Which bug should you work on first? Well, we would say that, whatever is prioritized at the top, you should fix. Putting dependencies between bugs, and especially when you've got a complex set of different projects working, sometimes it's really important. Anyway, so Microsoft have gone ahead and they've made it so it's much easier now to view dependencies. So work items can be PBIs or bugs or epics or features. And here is an example here of a dependency with an issue. So you can put basically lines between these features. Here is another example. Here is multiple dependencies. It's a good story here. I must warn you, try not to use this. It is much better just to work in small Scrum teams with a nice prioritized backlog. But when that can't work, you need this. But dependencies give me a bad smell because it reminds me of Microsoft Project. And Microsoft Project is the old way of doing things. And finally, I want to tell you about this Azure DevOps demo generator. This demo generator here will allow you to create a DevOps project and have a look at what's going on. So I'm just going to show you. Let's get started with the demo generator. And this demo generator is really good because rather than just a plain project, we now can have a project that is pre-populated and we can see what's going on. And here is an example. And this example here allows you to go ahead and create a project. And it's going to have the code and all the pipelines set up. So let's just say you went and created Tailwind Traders, which sounds a little bit like Northwind Traders to me, or a hotel, or there's lots of different examples here that you can have a look at. So let's see what we can just give it a name, select the type of template. And here you can see it created the project. It's plonked a whole lot of code in there. It's plonked a whole lot of work items. Builds have been created and release definitions have created. So if you wanted to know how to set it up so that tests are in the code and they won't get deployed if a test fails, etc., you can do all that. All right, and that shows you an example of a project that was created. So here is Smart Hotel. You can see 50 work items were put in there, one code commit with the whole project dumped in there in one go, and that would have a whole lot of stuff. You can see the builds were configured and they've run successfully, and the deployments have been too. So that's all very nice. Nice sample companies that you can look through and learn a lot from that. So I think that's awesome. By the way, I was asking the team for this from the first time I saw TFS back in 2005. So what's that? That's been 15 years to get these samples. But better late than never is the key. Now, of course, we don't finish news without checking out Scott Hanselman. And Scott Hanselman always has something. And just before I started, I went to Scott Hanselman to see what the hell has he blogged in the last week or two. And this is it. It's called .NET Boxed. It includes prescriptive templates for .NET Core. Now, one of the things I find funny is that here we have, when you go file a new project in Visual Studio, you see an Angular project, a Blazor project or a React project or something like that. Now, one of the things that it's always been very hard to is when is Microsoft going to add the latest one? And let's just say you want all your developers in your company to be going GraphQL or something, and it's not there. It is a lot of explaining to do about what you want them to be doing, where to grab things, etc. So here is an example. You can now enable these .NET Core templates. You can come through and you can go .NET New, install box templates. And then in there, you can basically grab a whole lot of templates. Here is the one I'm talking about, the GraphQL boxed. And so that ends up there. Once you do that and you go file new project in Visual Studio 2019, there you see the GraphQL one there. But anyway, that's my news. If you have cooler news, ping me. You can ping me, you can email me, Adam Cogan at ssw.com.au, or even better, put it on Twitter at Adam Cogan. And that would be awesome to share that. And I'll be sharing this news as well.